Hey everyone, this is Pastor Brandon, PB, here on Pastors Unfiltered. This is episode 50, the big 50. We made it this far without getting canceled. Unfortunately, today I am minus my co-host. This time it's not because Tony is on vacation, but Tony is leading our Seattle campus service today because we are recording on a Sunday. We don't normally do this. We normally record on Thursday, but this week we have a special guest, so we are recording on Sunday. I'm going to introduce you to our guest in just a moment, but I want to recap a little bit of what we talked about in last week's episode. We called it UFC 300B. Driscoll versus Lindell, and I shared with you what I believed are some great leadership lessons we could learn from the latest conflict between church leaders. And I appreciate all of the listens, all the comments. I've had messages from friends and people from around the nation who have listened to that podcast. In a very short period of time, it is already the most downloaded podcast we've ever done. It's the most views on YouTube that we've ever had. I want to thank everyone for their support. I do want to mention, as I was telling the story about John Lindell and Mark Driscoll, and I got to the Wednesday night service, in the middle of that, our Tony interrupted me and made a couple statements, and I never finished the story. And a few people have pointed that out, that I left out this key detail about these text messages. And just so for the sake of continuity and the sake of making sure that we provide all of the information as unbiased as we possibly can, I do want to share the piece of this that I missed. In the private text messages that were shared between Mark Driscoll and John Lindell, that John Lindell shared in front of his church at their Wednesday night prayer meeting, the context of those text messages were from Mark Driscoll to one of John Lindell's sons, talked about his concern for what he saw happen at that Stronger Men's Conference. He really doubled down and said, I'm not wrong. I really believe the stance that I took, and was really intense about it. It led to a phone conversation that David Lindell had with Mark Driscoll. None of us were ear witnesses or eyewitnesses to this phone call. So this is a recap of what that phone call was from David Lindell. And it consisted of, I'm worried about your brother. Supposedly his brother Brandon was the one that allowed this to happen, that they'd seen it a couple times in rehearsals. And so Mark Driscoll expressed his concern and said, as this transition happens, James River, at some point over the next couple years, John Lindell is transitioning leadership of the church to his two sons. And Mark Driscoll was challenging David to take leadership of the church. There's some issues, and it was pretty intense. And again, I don't want to go into details about it, other than I do want to reiterate that I missed that when I shared the story of the episode. Even though we didn't share that detail, the 7 points that I made about leadership, I believe, are still totally applicable, even with the new information that has come out since then. I want to mention what did come out since then is Alex Magala, who is the sword swallower, actually came out on his own Instagram to correct things that were said by not just Mark Driscoll, but also John Lindell. Alex stated that he is an Orthodox Christian. In other words, his parents were Orthodox Russian Christians. He was born into that, so he was baptized into that faith as an infant, but that he practices and seeks out all faiths. He was very clear on that. So I would say he is not a quote unquote, I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he rose from the grave, professing Christian. He was really clear on that. The other point that I think is important to mention is that he also said he does not have a family. He is not married. So those were things that were shared at that Wednesday night meeting that ended up being just resolutely false by the actual person. anyways, I don't want to continue on this conversation because, again, I'm hoping that this just goes away because in the greater scheme of the kingdom of God, I do not think this is a big deal. I do not think this is an issue of salvation for people. And I believe that the devil loves division. And so all he wants to do is cause division within the church. And we as Christians, we have the Spirit of Jesus inside of us. And Jesus is, he's a fighter. He fought death, hell, and the grave. And he won. And you and I have the spirit of a fighter inside of us. And that spirit of a fighter is meant to fight the enemy of our souls. But if you have the nature, the spirit of a fighter, you're always going to fight. And if you are not fighting who you're supposed to be fighting, your enemy, the enemy of your souls, you will fight each other. And I think this is a great example of that. And we don't want to perpetuate that conversation. So this is officially Pastors Unfiltered, period, about that conversation. But I did want to bring clarity to what I had missed because it had been brought up to me by numerous people. One lobby moment that I want to share before I introduce our guest, and which actually made it extra embarrassing, was I had picked him up from his hotel and was driving him to our church service. We're driving down 35th. It's pretty much known that the Mill Creek community doesn't always appreciate all the activity that Venture has on Sundays. Sometimes people are entering and exiting our parking lot a little bit faster than they would like, maybe cutting people off. And so there are oftentimes complaints to the police and to the city about the driving habits of people. By the way, I want to point out that the people that go to Venture, they are the city of Mill Creek. So you're literally complaining about yourself when you do that, but that's neither here nor there. But there was a speed trap on 35th as I was driving down, and with the speaker in the car, I looked in my rearview mirror. Lo and behold, there's lights behind me. Pulled into the church, getting ready for the early morning meeting. Cop walks up, says, "You were speeding." I allowed the speaker to go into our meeting, and I proceeded to get ticketed for driving 40 in a 35. So your pastor is a scofflaw. But fortunately, there's a legal system, and we have really good attorneys in my church who will help me get this knocked down to a, cell phone violation or seatbelt violation or something. But that's my lobby moment. On my way to church, I got a speeding ticket. Best part about that, as I'm sharing that, as I'm mic checking in the morning, the drummer at our church said, "I just got a speeding ticket doing this last week." So, hey, watch out. Don't speed on 35th. Be careful. Without further ado, I want to welcome our speaker. Our guest. His name is Choco De Jesus. He is now in charge of U.S. missions for the Assemblies of God. He is also doubling as our general treasurer, position that he will be relinquishing come June to focus on U.S. missions. He is the former pastor of a mega church in Chicago, preached this weekend at Venture, literally preached fire, tore down the house. He is powerful, funny, and we get him today on Pastors Unfiltered. Welcome, Choco.
Oh, thank you. What a joy. Thank you for having me. And I was an eyewitness. We will be connected for the rest of our lives as I saw that ticket happen.
Hey, I went to a conference with John Maxwell, so all the large AG churches, the over 1,500 churches, whatever. That was in Florida, and John Maxwell was the guest speaker, and he was talking about how you make yourself memorable. He says, when you meet key people, you got to do something that reminds them about you. You will never forget.
I will never forget.
The pastor getting pulled over by the cops in his town. Yeah.
And you handled it well. I want you to know. You handled it well, so...
Well, I didn't want to get caught up on Assembly of God charges in addition to my legal issues. Really quick, just out of curiosity, how did you get the nickname Choco?
You know, when I was young, when I was 8 years old, my uncles used to call me Chocolate. So I love chocolate. And when I got saved at 14, the Christians in the church took the latte out and left it as Choco. And I remember, I don't know, it could have been like 10 years ago, Rick Warren, him and I were speaking at a conference. And he says, "Hey, I just want you to know that the latte is back. He's the Choco, and I'm the latte." So now we got Choco Latte.
Ooh, that's really good. I like it.
Yeah. So that's how we came to Choco.
So this is totally random, and I didn't tell you I was going to
Yeah.
I didn't really give you a heads up on what we're going to talk about at
right.
all.
That's okay.
I did warn you that it's unfiltered.
Yeah.
Did you do sports in high school?
I did. I did football.
Well, you couldn't be called Choco Latte if you're playing football. That doesn't sound good. Choco over a stadium speaker system sounds
better.
great. So you should thank that church. They changed that nickname.
They named it to Choco. That's right. That's right.
Why don't you share a little bit of your story? You didn't grow up in church. You shared it at church, and it was the part of what I wanted to talk about because it was so intriguing. You were the youngest of a family of 6.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to just take a few minutes and just kind of share your testimony?
Yeah, absolutely. Was born and raised in the hood of Chicago, Puerto Rican descent. 6 in our family, 5 brothers, 1 sister. My dad, my recollection was that I was 8 years old when he was at a bar and I pleaded him not to leave my mom. At this point in my life, Pastor Brandon, I'm not a Christian. I go to the Catholic Church, but I wasn't serving Jesus. So at 8 years old, I pleaded my dad not to leave my mom. Nevertheless, he left. He left the city of Chicago, went to another state. And as a result of that, I just had some hard upbringing, poor. I didn't get my bed until I was 18 years old. I was either living in a mattress, on the floor. We were just poor, jumping from apartment to apartment in the city of Chicago. My mother was like a gypsy. She was just going from place to place. And so, during the 70s, there was a riot that broke out in the city of Chicago between the Puerto Ricans and the police department. And the police officer shot 2 Puerto Ricans in the back, and that created an uproar. And that kind of galvanized all the Hispanic gangs. And that's where I lived, Humboldt Park. Even today, 2024, Humboldt Park, if you go there, there are 2 Puerto Rican flags. I mean, they're just humongous flags. One from one side of the community, it's like the gateway to the Puerto Rican. And so that's where I lived for 55 years of my life, in Humboldt Park. And during the riots of Humboldt Park, it's where I came to get hired as a 14-year-old boy to go work at for the city of Chicago to clean streets. But my assignment that particular summer of 1977 led me to a church. For the first time in my life, I walked into a Pentecostal church, Assembly of God Church.
And what was the name of that church?
Palestine Christian Temple.
Okay, you said that in the service. Why did they use that name?
Well, back in the day, in the 70s and 60s, they would call their churches, because Palestine is the territory where Jesus walked in. So they wanted to identify where Jesus walked in, or Jerusalem, or Bethlehem Church. So these were cities, but Palestine was the territory where Jesus ministered around. And so that's why the church gave that name. For 35 years, it was called Palestina, Palestine Christian Temple of the Assemblies of God. And that's where my assignment led me as a 14-year-old boy. My pastor, who became my father-in-law after a long time, obviously, but is there where I came to know Jesus Christ as my personal Savior, as a small little church there, Hispanic church in the hood of Chicago at 14. And I gave my life to Christ in August of that year. In November of that year, we go into a youth convention in Lansing, Michigan, where they are bringing in hundreds of young people, and they brought a guest speaker, and he makes an altar call. I get saved, and I come again, and a lady prophesies, and she prophesied these words to me, and I will never forget these words. I've called you to be a great leader. Stay in my path. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. Now, those who are listening, you already know that's the covenant that God made with Abraham. But at 14, I don't know what this is. I was intrigued by it. This lady's telling me that I have a plan, that God has a plan for me. Okay, no problem. I'm just new to the faith at this point in my life. And then I remember getting up from the altar and going into the elevator. When I get into the elevator, a gentleman walks in a suit. And when the doors close, he says, "Have you not heard? I called you to be a great leader. Stay in my path. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you."
So when did you make the connection that call to leadership was a call to ministry leadership?
Man, I think I didn't make the connection until later on in probably my 18 and 19 years old. But at 14, I just felt like someone had a plan for my life, because I didn't know what was my plan. I failed third grade. I couldn't read or write. I wasn't I had over 500 people who graduated from my class in high school. I think it was number 517. I was number 515. A grade point average.
Wow, so there's 2 that did worse than you.
Yeah.
What are they doing now?
I have no idea what they're doing. But there you go. And so I had no idea that this was the God was setting in place a motion that my father lacked and my mother lacked, but God was setting in parameters for me.
Yeah.
And so I just took it for face value, bro. Seriously.
So for you, calling was like a journey, a process over time that God kind of revealed pieces of it.
Absolutely.
And you just kind of kept walking through doors, and God would open doors and you would walk through it. And then you just, one day you ended up pastoring the church you got saved in.
In the year 2000, July 9, 2000, I ended up 23 years later being the pastor of that small little 68 people.
Wow.
That God called me to.
So you told this story at our church on Sunday. And again, if you weren't here at Venture this past Sunday, you should go back, listen to our podcast online, hear the message. It was super powerful. But you told the story about you went there for your job that you were hired to do. Yeah. And they said, we actually don't want you to clean up streets. We want you to help with our vacation Bible school.
That's right.
And you said, well, as long as I still get paid, I'm good. I just want to make sure. Did they pay you?
Yeah, every 2 weeks I got a check. That was my only concern. My mother was a single mom. In Humboldt Park, when you think about it, over 40% of the people have single moms in that community. So I just wanted to make sure I get a check, bro. I don't care if it was cleaning streets or kids. So this was my introduction of children's ministry of that local church.
So you're 59 years old now. You have a doctorate.
I do.
So when you got saved as a 14-year-old, how knowledgeable of the Bible were you?
None.
Yeah, I got saved at 16. I didn't even know the basic plot of the Bible. The very first time I ever heard the story of David and Goliath, which is what you preached on this morning at church, I thought the church world got it from the Rocky movies because it reminded me so much of the Rocky. I knew Rocky, that story, better than I knew the Bible. So you and I are brothers when it comes to that.
Yes.
And we also show hope for all my listeners that, hey, we both have doctorates.
Yes.
And we started knowing nothing. So there's hope for you.
There's hope for you. Listen, I've said it at your church. God is in the business of using unusual people. And you and I are unusual people.
Yeah.
That God would put a mandate over our lives just because we walked out of obedience. Not the most educated. I'm not the most educated in the room. I get that. But I have a love for Christ. And he saved me and became my father. And so I'm loyal to him. I'm loyal to his kingdom and loyal to his message. And so not knowing the Bible, I knew that I first going to meet the Creator.
Yeah.
Not his word, but the Creator himself, and journey through that life, you know.
The very first Bible verse that I ever remember when I started going to church when I was 15, 16 years old.
Yeah.
And the first Bible verse that I remember was the Psalm that says, he's a father to the fatherless and he puts the lonely in families.
That's good.
And I remember as a young teenager, I was so lonely. And I remember thinking, if God can be like that to me, then maybe I should check this thing out.
Mm-hmm. You know, my first verse I learned, and this is interesting because your environment creates that verse for you, right? Because I was surrounded by gangs, bro. Every time I come out of church on Sunday night, the Latin Kings were there, the Vice Lords. So you had to represent something. So my verse was, if God is for me, who can be against me? So I'm in that survivor mode in the hood of Chicago, thinking, God is with me, man. I don't care what you're going to do with me. And I would literally, Pastor Brendan, I had to represent Jesus.
Yeah.
So I would be surrounded by 15 guys with bats or 12 guys with chains. What do you be about? What do you be about? And I'm like, I'd be about Jesus. What'd you be about? So that verse, if God is for me, who could be against me? I took that to heart.
So being the youngest of 6 kids, how did your older siblings feel like? How did they feel when you started becoming a church kid?
You know, my family, my brother who was in the gang was very thankful. And anytime I would walk, you know, he would have gang meetings. He would say, this is not for you. Keep going. Go to church. So they were very grateful. Even today, my brothers, my sister are very grateful and proud of what God has done in my life. So they were very protective that I didn't get into that mess of drugs. Never did weed, never smoked, never did none of the cocaine. Didn't do none of that. My brothers kind of just shielded me from that lifestyle.
Yeah, the Catholic background probably helped a little bit. Again, I'm Italian, and so even though I wasn't raised in church, there's the Catholic past that we have. And so when faith becomes a part of your life, grandparents and great-grandparents, everybody's kind of proud a little bit.
Yeah. One of the things I saw in the Catholic Church that really knocked me out was my mother one day invited the priest over to our house. She made dinner. And I remember the priest being in the kitchen with some of my family members drinking beer. And this is exactly what my father did. So that was a crash, bro. Seeing this spiritual man, who's supposed to be spiritual, diving into what my father did.
Yeah, just take that collar off, become who you are in private.
Yeah. It was really a culture shock for me.
So tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so Elizabeth and I, my wife, I met her. She was 12. And I was 14. I asked her to be my girlfriend.
What did she say?
She said, no.
Okay,
She said,
are
are you serious? She's a pastor's daughter. I didn't know that. I just thought she was beautiful. And she was standing by the wall with like two other of her girlfriends. And I just went up to her, bro, this is how slick I was. I'm like, hey, do you want to be my lady? And she didn't say anything. And so I called her that evening. And I said, hey, forget about what I said to you by the church. Because I think she was going to drop me or whatever. But when she turned 17, I turned 19, I asked her to be my girlfriend. We dated for 5 years. And we were involved in the youth ministry, involved in Royal Rangers. She's missionettes. We were involved in the local church, helping Sunday school and so forth. And we got married in 1988, June 11th. For those who are listening, my brothers, you need to know the dates. You need to know that. Those are good points that you can get with your wives. There you go. Thank you.
June 19th, 1992.
Is that right?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
It's my anniversary.
Yeah. So we got married June 11th, and we have 3 beautiful children. They're adults, 33, 31, 29. And 6 grandchildren, soon to be 7 grandchildren. And so those are our kids. 2 of them live in Chicago. 1 lives in Colorado.
Well, brag on one of your granddaughters. Just right before we were recording this podcast, your granddaughter FaceTimed you, which, by the way, was the most adorable thing I've ever seen. Fill us in.
Yeah, well, just a few moments ago, as Pastor was about to interview me, my granddaughter calls me. She's 7, going on 8, May 26th, and she's gymnastics. And my wife is in Illinois going to the competition. And so I get a picture from my wife, a video as well, that she came in first place. So she's in that, you know, how you put them at first, second, third in that pyramid, and you stand up there where they have a picture of her. And so she FaceTimed us while I'm here with you. And she was telling me, Papa, I did a 9.5, a 9.2, and in total up like 36 something points. And she came out in first place. So I told her I'm very proud of her. And mind you, she's been competing for a few months now, a few years. It's just the first time that she comes out in first place. So she has been practicing for years to do this, even though she's only 7 years old. So very proud.
And let me just tell you, as a father, someday going to be a grandfather,
come on,
there's nothing that speaks more of your character than the fact that right after her gymnastics meet, she FaceTimed her papa.
That's right.
You are like living the dream.
I am.
So you take over your father-in-law's church. You were saying at our Sunday morning service that the church had 68 people when you started.
Yeah. 68 people on a Sunday morning, 23 probably Sunday night.
So when how long did you pastor the church before you went to the national office?
Yeah, 19 years.
So in 19 years, when you left the church, what was the average weekly attendance?
In the 8 campuses and the planted church we did in the south side, it was probably like 17,000.
So you start with 68, grows to 17,000. Yeah. What happened in those 19 years? Teach us.
Yeah, Unfiltered. This is Unfiltered.
Yes.
We were fishing.
We're from Seattle. We like fishing around here.
Well, we got to throw the net. To every pastor that's listening to me, you will reap what you sow. If you sow nothing, you reap nothing. And I was a church that was sowing every day, Pastor Brandon. We're throwing seeds, reaching prostitutes, gangbangers, drug dealers, just throwing out there in the community and then bringing in the fish. And so we went from 1 service to 2 services to 3 services to 4 services in the venue that my father-in-law had. And we were getting complaints from the community. They're like, hey, bro, there's traffic in the alley. There's traffic everywhere. We're running 4 services on a Sunday.
Are you getting pulled over by cops and given speeding tickets?
Yes, I'm going to say yes so that people
good.
know you're not the only one.
All right.
Yeah. And so we went from that venue, from 2000 to 2003, we went into a school. We went to a school, which is my alma mater, and it fit like 1,000 people, 850 to 1,000. We squeezed in 1,000. And so we went from 4 services down to 3 in that venue for 10 years. And for those who are listening, we broke the myth that you need a church building to grow a church. That's a lie. You do not need a building to grow a church. You need the presence of God.
Yes.
We went from 3 services at that school to 4 services to 5 services. And then we started planting churches. I didn't even know I was a church planter, bro. I didn't even know I was a church planter. Here's what I did. Because this is Unfiltered, I took one guy and his wife. I said, bro, you've been with me for several years now. You got a call upon your life. I'm going to give you 25 people. Get out. Take them to the community here in Chicago. I just need 25 seats for unsaved people. I didn't know I was church planting, that there was a terminology called church planting. And so then I did that in 2004 to an African-American. I show you his video. He's killing it in Chicago, bro.
Yeah, I want his building. His building's amazing.
He's killing it. He's killing it in Chicago. He started with 9 people. And now there's close to maybe, I don't know, he told me the other day, like 40,000 people call his church home.
What do you say to, like, a lot of the church planning books that go out now? Like, one of the lines that they use is, and I've heard this at conferences, heard this everywhere, that you want to launch large, and if you don't launch with at least 200 on your first service, that you will, the line is that you will die a slow death over your next 3 years. And you just talked about, one of your guys starts with 25. This guy has thousands going to his church. He started with 9. So what do you say to the people that buy into they have to start large?
I'm not in that room. I'm not in the room that you need $250,000. You need to have 150 to 200 people to start your church. I'm not in that room. Right now, I can talk to you about one of our other churches. It started with 23 people in Elgin, Illinois. 23. It was a church that was dying, an American church that was dying. The demographic changed to Hispanic. I shut it down, that church, and I bussed in the people to my campus in Chicago. Elgin is an hour away from Chicago. This past Resurrection Sunday, over 701 people have been in that church. So I am not in that camp that you need 200 people. No, you need the presence of God. God says, I will give you increase. He's the one that gives us the seed. He gives us the increase. So I'm not there.
So what would you say to the church planner that went to college, went to all the seminars, read all the books, went through all of our CMN stuff and signed up with ARC and launches, and they've got 40 people coming and they're really discouraged about it? What would you encourage them with?
I would encourage that pastor that has 40 people that have been coming to their church. All you need is 3 people to change Babylon. 3. Out of the 40, give me 3 of them, and we can change that community.
That's good.
That's all you need. There's a Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So this idea that I need 400 people, this is not true. And so that pastor that has 40 people, continue to love your community. Love your community. You're hearing it here, Unfiltered. It is God that gives increase to your church, to your finances, is God. Not anything that Choco can do. All I did, Pastor Brendan, was to love on people. Yeah,
you function like a missionary. You did exactly what we do on a foreign mission field here. And when you understand that America is very much post-Christian, that as pastors, we need to see ourselves more like missionaries and apostles in our communities than maybe what we did before when we just saw ourselves, well, as a pastor, I'm going to come in, have 500 people, and I'm just going to teach them. You gotta start from scratch. You gotta fish.
You gotta fish. Listen, 68 people I started with, We were, for 35 years, we were such an introvert church. We've never did anything outside of our community. I became the pastor in the year 2000. My first outreach was $100 ice cream cone. In the city of Chicago, they got ice cream trucks that go up and down the community, and they give you ice cream cones. You pay for 50 cents or 75 cents. Anyway, I get in the middle of the street, bro, and I have $100 in my hand. And I see the ice cream truck. You can hear the music coming. You can hear it. I stopped the truck. I said, my name is Pastor Choco. I'm the pastor of this church. I got $100, but I want to buy $100 worth of ice cream cones for kids. Can I do that? Sure, he says. I said, with the caveat is that I need to get in your truck. I want to give them the ice cream cone and let them know that Jesus paid for it. Now, mind you, my church for 35 years never did this. Who went with me? Me and my wife. Let's do this. So we went out there, boom, 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 put the music. I told the guy, put the music loud. And we went up and down the community. People would come by the car, by the window. I would give them an ice cream cone. They wanted to give me their dollar. I said, no, 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 Jesus already paid. He paid for you. He paid for the ice cream. Seed. All this was a seed. Following week, I showed pictures to the church. I said, here's what we did. So I went to the deacon board, who for 35 years don't do this. I said, I'm going to need now, I'm going to do 2 ice cream trucks, but I need clowns. I'm going to give you a wig. I'm going to give you some makeup, and I need you to be a clown. So as the truck is going, you're greeting kids. And that's how we started our outreach ministries across the city of Chicago.
Was there a point in that 19 years where you had a really clear moment of breakthrough where people just started coming from all over, or was it just kind of slow, steady, consistent growth over time?
I think the breakthrough came in 2008. In 2008, I paused everything in our church because we were just growing so fast. So I called it Gauge '08. Let's gauge ourselves. How healthy are we really as a church? Because we're doing great outreaches. We're reaching thousands of people in the city of Chicago. So I stopped women's ministry, men's ministry, youth ministries. For 2 weeks, I had in 2 different weekends, 400 leaders here, 400 leaders here. Let's take a survey. How healthy are we as a local church? And that for us was the turning point for us. We knew where we were strong in, and then we knew where we need to fix.
And what were the things that you felt like you needed to fix?
Discipleship.
Okay.
We were not strong in that.
Yeah, it always seems, I would say, the same process for venture. We are we love fishing. We're very evangelistic. Sure. And there came a pause 2 years ago. We thought, we don't just want a bunch of people with shallow roots. We want people with deep, deep, deep roots. Deep. And there is a major shift into discipleship, teaching the Bible, and you get people with deep roots.
This is important because I think, and we did, and we turned it around into discipleship. I think discipleship is something we've abandoned in our culture today as a church. Because it takes a lot of work, bro, to work with knuckleheads.
Well, and it takes 19 years.
19 years.
It's not like when they say that the average pastor is staying at a church for less than 2 years now.
Yeah.
You can go in, make a big splash, get a bunch of new people to start coming, but our job is to raise up disciples, and that takes time. It takes living with people, ministering to people, being with the good times and the bad times. It takes 19 years.
Let me educate your listeners on something. The Apostle Paul, who was called by the head of the church on the road to Damascus, which is interesting that Jesus would call them on a Gentile road because that's who he's going to go to. But he calls him, the head of the church calls him. And how long did the Apostle Paul waited until he really started? 13 years.
Yeah.
13 years. And if it wasn't for Barnabas, we don't have the New Testament.
Yep.
So Paul himself, who was called by the head of the church, secondly, had to not be affirmed by the church. So those guys that are out there that are listening, I got a calling upon my life. That's awesome. But you need the church to affirm that. And that's what Barnabas did when he found him and he took him to Tarsus. He took him over there too. And so we need to understand that this is a process that we're in. And discipleship is being willing to walk with disciples. Secondly, when Jesus asked his disciples, who do people say I am? In Caesarea Philippi, for 2.5 years, he asked them, who do people say I am? And they said, you're Elijah, you're John the Baptist. I know, but who do you say? Peter said, you're the Christ. You're the Messiah. And then Jesus says, you're right. This was not revealed to you by man, but by God. And what did he say, Pastor Brother? Upon this rock, I will build my church. For the first time in the ministry of Jesus, he uses the terminology church. What was he doing before that? Discipling.
Yep.
2.5 years walking with knuckleheads. So in other words, before he built the church, he built disciples.
Yeah.
And we need to build disciples. Then we can start building the church. You could find a church, but it doesn't mean that you'll always find disciples. But if you find a disciple, look around. There's got to be a church somewhere.
No, that's really good. I asked you in the car. I'm not going to ask you now because I want to jump to the next thing. But I asked you in the car, what led you to lay down this church, to do what you're doing now? I just want to jump to, will you let our listeners know what your role is now with the national office?
Yeah. So I was for 4.5 years general treasurer. I oversaw the money investments of the Assemblies of God. And a few months ago, I was asked if I would consider being the AGUSM director of U.S. missions here in the country. And after prayerfully with my wife, we felt like this is the right thing to do. America is in trouble. America has drifted. And I want to step in there and engage culture, engage government, engage education, engage music prophetically. So this is what led me to step into this role to become the U.S. director of AGs here in the United States.
So what exactly does that role do?
Yeah. So you, as a director, you oversee ministries like Chi Alpha, like Teen Challenge, Church Mobilization, chaplaincies. We got chaplaincies in prisons. We got chaplaincies in the Army and the Marines. We've got a chaplaincy in hospitals. So we've got thousands of missionaries in the United States that are U.S. missionaries that I'm able to speak into. And I want to be able to raise that to 10,000 missionaries in the U.S. because the United States, the world has come to the United States. So the director of U.S. missions speaks into those ministries, plus also gives vision to the country about where we're going.
So what are you excited about moving forward?
I'm excited about what God's going to do through these ministries. I'm excited about a clear, shared vision within the U.S. missions. I'm excited about the churches of the Assemblies of God experiencing a growth that they've never seen before. I'm a firm believer. We've invaded 14 cities already, Brandon. 14 through Seek and Save. From the treasury seat, Rob Kettling came to me a year and a half ago, said, if I give you $150,000, what would you do with it? I said, I would invade 4 cities for Jesus. He says, okay, here, invade. And I said, whoa, I'm not the U.S. mission director, I'm the treasurer. I went to Pastor Doug and he said, you got to do it. So we invaded Yuma, Arizona. We invaded Detroit, Michigan, Newark, New Jersey, Chicago. What do I mean by invade? We mobilized hundreds and hundreds of volunteers from churches of AG churches within those cities. And we started walking the streets of those cities, praying for people, baptizing people in water, making altar calls, moving the church, Pastor Brandon. Because if you don't move the church, atrophy settles in. And that's what's happened to some of our churches, atrophy. So I'm excited about moving the church. The body of Jesus Christ is a living organism. It has to be moved. And that's what I'm planning to do in Jesus' name. And with the help with you and other pastors like yourself, like-minded, about emptying hell and filling heaven. That's what I want to do.
What do you see? Let me rephrase this. What are your hopes for the church Big C in the next 10 years in America?
Yeah, that's, I hope that we would have powers, the powers to speak into the different levels of government, these institutions. I'm hoping to see that people would engage becoming politicians, Christians becoming politicians that love Jesus. They're in the choir, they're in the worship team, but they could become a city councilman. They could become a senator. More of that. I'm hoping that more of our kids would engage those powers. I'm hoping that we can stir that up.
Yeah.
in the next 10 years, even more.
You're hoping that we'll do what Jesus suggested when he said, you are the salt of the earth.
Yeah.
That people would go be salt.
Yeah. In Matthew 5, that's what he says. You're the light of the world. You're salt of the earth. When he said that, my friends that are listening, that's not a compliment. It's a responsibility.
Yeah.
And I want to take that serious. Listen, and I don't know when we're ending this, but there's going to be an audit one day, Pastor Brandon. God's going to audit my life. And he's going to say, Choco, I send you to Springfield. I gave you that position. What did you do with it? Well, I was trying to get revoted again, so I played it safe. There's only 2 words I want to hear when this is all over. I don't want to hear Nike, just do it. I don't want to hear Burger King, have it your way. 2 words. Matthew chapter 25. Well done.
Well done.
Well done, Choco. Well done. So I know one day there's going to be an audit. And those that are listening, God's going to take an audit in your life. And you and I better make sure that when he comes back, that we've done what he said. We've invested it. So
that's good. Hey, I really appreciate your time.
Yeah.
I've got more things for you to do today. I do have 2 last-second questions for you that are totally random.
Okay. Cub fan.
Okay, that was one of them. I was going to
is
say,
it really?
Yeah, I was going to say, what are your dyed-in-the-blue sports teams that you're into?
I am a Cub fan. 2016. If they don't win another championship in another 100 years, I have no problems. I already saw the first one.
All-time favorite Cubs player?
Ooh, my word. Well, I got to go with Ivan De Jesus. He was a shortstop in the 70s. Ryan Sandberg, second base.
No Sammy Sosa?
No, Sammy Sosa. I'll go with Ivan De Jesus because he had our last name. He wasn't a cousin or nothing like that. He just had our last name. And he was just sharp, shortstop.
And Chicago Bears fan?
I am a Bear fan to the bone. I know we haven't won since 1985, the Super Bowl Shuffle. Pray for us. But hopefully we have a good pick this year.
I have a confession to make.
Come on.
Did you know that I have the Super Bowl Shuffle memorized?
Do you really?
I have the whole thing memorized.
Let me hear it, buddy.
Oh, I don't. That's really good. How about when we're in the car driving back and I don't have people that are going to make reels about it? Singing. I legitimately
cool.
do. No, I was a huge Walter Payton fan as a kid growing up.
Yes.
Yes. I have all kinds of autographed things by Walter Payton all over my house.
Do you really?
Yes. I love Walter Payton.
We just had Mike Singletary with us last year.
Love Mike Singletary, too.
The middle linebacker. I loved his eyes.
I'm a Raider fan, but as a Raider fan, we respect other really good players.
Yeah. Well, the 1985 Monsters of the Midway, bro. I go back, I kid you not, for your listeners, I go back and look at them at YouTube. Because that type of football today, I think we're playing flag football today in the NFL.
Oh, compared to those days.
To those?
Hey, when I go back to the Raiders Super Bowl championship teams,
Yeah.
I mean, those were tough men.
Tough. Bleeding. Their knuckles are bleeding. They're in the line. Today, we got to go get some Band-Aid. We got to just fix it.
I mean, look at the way we treat quarterbacks today compared to like Jim McMahon.
Yeah. It's just crazy. Anyway, it's not the same way, but the Bears are my team. And
Yeah, hockey fan?
No.
Okay.
No, not a hockey fan. Bulls when Jordan was there. After that, I got, this whole 2020 with the NBA. I lost interest in the NBA and just didn't like where the Bulls were going. But anyway, Michael Jordan back in the days.
We always ask every guest 3 questions.
Okay.
So this is just kind of bullet questions real quick. We ask them what you're currently listening to, meaning podcasts, what you're reading, what book you're reading, and what you do for fun. So what podcast do you listen to right now?
Wow. There is a couple of them I listen to.
You have to add Pastors Unfiltered to your list.
Pastors Unfiltered. That's number 1. Got that? You guys put that down. Pastor Unfiltered, number 1. The leadership podcasts of also with Greg Rochelle.
Yeah, that's really excellent.
Yeah, I listen to that.
I do encourage you to listen to the Bema podcast. It's phenomenal. Marty Solomon. What books you reading right now?
Yeah, so I'm reading The Defining of Excellence, 7 Things About Excellence. I have that in my bag that I've been reading now that I'm taking over U.S. missions. So Defining Excellence.
And what do you like to do for fun?
I play racquetball.
Racquetball.
I play racquetball 5 o'clock in the morning on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I love puzzles.
Okay, I know that my assistant had given you some puzzles.
Hey, hook me up.
I got a text from you thanking me for the puzzles.
Yes.
And I'm like, I don't even know what this means. I literally had to text her and say, what did he mean? And she goes, oh, his admin said he likes puzzles. So
I love puzzles. You got me a Wrigley Field and the Bears. So thank you for that.
hey, we care at Venture. Choco, thank you very much for your
Thank you.
time.
Thank
You've
you,
been a
Brendan.
blessing. You're going to continue to be a blessing today. But thank you for joining us on Pastors Unfiltered.
Yep.
For all of you listening, I will see you next week. Next week, we have another special guest. Marty Solomon will be on the podcast. So the world famous podcaster, Marty Solomon, is going to be on this podcast. Check it out next week. I want to thank all of our sponsors, Logos Bible Software. You want to study the Bible, Logos is the way to do it. If you want a discount, use the discount code WeAreVenture. Please like, subscribe, share this podcast. Thank you guys. We'll see you next week.